This is Deacon Chuck Kelly for WQPH 89.3 FM, Catholic Radio, serving Shirley, Fitchburg, and the world. And I am here this evening with Bill McCann. You are the director, writer, producer, starred in a new movie.
Yes.
It's called The Liberator. The Liberator, which is all about Daniel O'Connell. It's interesting that England looked at Ireland as a problem. And it's like, there's a problem to be solved. And it looked at Daniel O'Connell as almost a bigger problem to solve. And we'll get into the story in a little bit, but I want to know about you, Bill McCann. What's there to know about you besides writing and starring in this new movie? You get a lot of other persons that have helped you out with this, so I want to hear about that as well.
We do, and so thank you so much for having me. And it's actually very encouraging just to hear you asking about this character of Daniel O'Connell. That is really what has motivated me years to take this project on and to make this film. Because I do think all people, but Catholics and Irish Catholics, would really benefit from knowing more about him and his story and his people that he led a couple of 100 years ago. But I'll just take it back a little bit to how I first learned about Daniel O'Connell. I did a year abroad back in 1985 and 86. When I was in college, I went to the University College Cork for a year, primarily to study Irish literature. James Joyce and William Butler Yeats, and Swift and O'Casey and Synge and all these great writers. And when I was there, you couldn't help but notice this character of Daniel O'Connell. If you've ever been to Dublin, on O'Connell Street, huge statue. When I say huge, it's 3 stories high. You have to look up to see who's at the top of this pedestal.
Is that near the needle, like the giant needle, or is that?
No.
Okay, all right. I remember we did a tour. My wife and I had gone there for a wedding anniversary. I just remember this giant needle, and
in Dublin,
nobody really knew what it was supposed to be, except I think they called it God's toothpick. That was it. Yep. But yeah, plenty of statues, and so this giant tribute to Daniel O'Connell.
Exactly.
Yeah,
At the time, Ireland also had its own money. Now they're on the euro, but when I was there back in the 80s, they had their own money, and on the 20-pound note was a picture of Daniel O'Connell. And there are statues in Ennis and in Limerick, and there are O'Connell streets. And I would ask folks, I would say, this Daniel O'Connell, he's this famous character, what did he do? And they would say, oh, Daniel O'Connell. He was a great man, Billy, a great man. And I'd say, okay, well, what did he do? And they would say, Daniel O'Connell, is it? And I would say, yes. The Liberator, is it? I'd say, yes. He was a great man, Billy, a great man. So finally, I cracked open a book and started to read about him. Right. And he was a great man. He was a colossal figure. It's really hard to overstate the leadership that he had at the time in Ireland. He was essentially the Irish version of a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King. He was born in 1775.
Yeah.
At the time, there was considerable persecution of Catholics, but he was he had a rich uncle who was able to send him away from Ireland to France.
Wore a funny hat, didn't he?
He wore a funny hat, which comes into his name was Hunting Cap.
Right, Hunting Cap.
Because he was kind of cheap. And there was a tax on other types of hats. So he would, and actually, there's a Hunting Cap in the film.
Oh, interesting. Yes, great.
We have that character. And so he was educated in France. He actually witnessed some of the French Revolution, which gave him his first, I think, aversion to kind of mob violence and mob rule and the mob mentality. He later took on his education in London and became a lawyer. Right. And was extremely gifted, extremely smart, extremely witty, but also very brave. He really wouldn't, kowtow to anyone. So he came back and started his practice. And then he started, and the line from the film that I use that I really like expresses what he did is he took all Ireland as his client. And he began to agitate strictly peacefully for the rights of his people. Now, the film, has to condense many, many years and lots of different strategies and tactics that he took to do that into a couple of hours. But essentially, that's what he did. And he involved all the people.
Yeah, you could go back to, you look at Ireland's history. I mean, I guess you could call Daniel O'Connell is really a father of modern day Ireland. You notice, I mean, he really seems to have made such a huge impact. You go back to the rebellion of 1798, right, with like 30,000 people died, and he would have been like in his early 20s back then, right? So he would have witnessed that.
Exactly.
And then again, with his exposure in France and seeing the French Revolution, and he would have seen not only the violence associated with these revolutions, but also where's the fruit. Right.
Exactly.
So this would have really impacted his. One of the questions I had was, as I was thinking about this project that you undertook, how did this change you? You know, what was your approach? I want to find out a little bit more about you in this project, and then.
Yes.
I can't imagine you'd get into something like this and not be affected.
Exactly. In many ways, I feel providential ways. Because it has been a very long journey. So 1985, 86, my college years, that sowed the seed for me. That was, boy, this is an exciting story. It's kind of surprising to me that more people don't know his story. I think they'd be interested in his story. It's a dramatic story, so I think it lends itself to a visual, to a film. There's a duel, and he's a great orator.
He actually shot somebody at one point, didn't he?
He did. So that plays out in the film as well.
Really?
Oh, yes.
No, so spoiler alert.
But it's just a very interesting, dramatic story about him and his people. But as an Irish Catholic, I was always proud of my heritage and my faith. As you said, he was a founding father. He really did embody that. But he does, and you started to pick up on it. He runs counter to, even into this day, it's going to be a bit controversial. The folks that you're kind of referencing, the United Irishmen, Wolfe Tone is a big name, Robert Emmett is a big name, were folks who took the violent route and wanted to rise up, and did. And a lot of blood was spilled as a result of those efforts. And as you also pointed out, they ultimately were not successful. Yeah,
one of the points that I saw in the trailer, you've obviously done extensive study of his life. There's a point in the movie, there's a young man that you're working with. I'm not quite sure what I'll have to watch to find out. But then you said, do you attend church regularly? And he's like, well, not really. And you said, it's no good to liberate your country, and then if you lose your soul. Oh my God, that's so great. I mean, to primarily focused on the liberation of our own brokenness, the really the call to Catholicity. It seems to be very much embedded in this.
Absolutely. So, he was first and foremost Christian.
Right.
And then a Catholic Christian. And what I find interesting in today's context, and if you think about great people that we hold in high esteem in terms of their leadership, so I'm thinking of someone like a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King, they would also say, first, I'm a man of God. And in the case of Martin Luther King, first, I'm a Christian. He was a Lutheran pastor. That was always first in their lives and in his life. So yes, you work to address problems in society and right wrongs, but most important is your faith, your relationship with God. And, in his case, is Catholic faith.
It was his identity. He's I'm Daniel O'Connell,
right?
Catholic.
Right. And everything flows from that. And not only flows, I would say, but then is the source of strength and impetus and courage and faith and resolve and hope, which I really feel that also he drew on that from his Catholic. He had an incredible hope. And faith, maybe even to a degree that wasn't quite justified by the way things turned out. Right. I truly believe his own personal faith is what propelled him to have the courage, act with courage, act with conviction.
So here you are in your early 20s over in Ireland. You're inspired by this learning of Daniel O'Connell, and between that point and then being able to, it seemed like the story must be told.
Right. That's what exactly. And I've always enjoyed Ireland. And then, life happened for me and got married and had children and supporting them. But we took several trips to Ireland over those. One year in 2004, we had a wonderful home exchange in Ireland, in Limerick. And actually, my wife, Karen, knew I was always thinking about this, reading books. She went into an Irish bookstore and she said, "What's the best biography about Daniel O'Connell that you have?" Yeah. And immediately the bookseller pulled it off the shelf and said, "You got to read this one." And I hadn't come across that one. And I'd read many, and many after that. This one, his name was Sean O'Phelan, and he called his book King of the Beggars, the biography about Daniel O'Connell. That one, it really helped me click in terms of how the story might be told, because any man's life, right? He was 71 years old, is going to be complex and lots of, how do you distill that down and how do you tell it dramatically? And you've
got so many different political points that are describing him.
Exactly.
I've heard him described as a coarse man, here's a man of coarse language, and where the political realm, you had more of a poetic prose to your dialoguing and giving speeches. Now along comes Daniel O'Connell, who's seems very coarse and very upsetting. There was really interesting speech. I guess it was right around the time of this assassination of the British Prime Minister Spencer Perceval. It's maybe an obscure reference, but it really stuck out to me that it was the only British Prime Minister to be assassinated, from what I understand. And everybody in this group is crying about the loss of this Prime Minister. And Daniel O'Connell's like, "Why are you crying for this person? Number one, he didn't know you. Number two, he did nothing for you. And by the way, you've got this widow Byrne, who was it her sons killed and slaughtered? I don't know the story, but a bit of it anyway. He was able to take that situations he was really able to connect with persons in a real way, in a gutsy way, in a very gritty sort of language, and be effective.
Exactly.
So I think it spoke to his intelligence, and I think even in France, if he had stuck around there, they probably would have. They said they would have made him king. Okay,
it's entirely possible,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, I think you've really put on it. One of his skills was oratory, and his ability to match it to his audience. Right. So if he was speaking before the masses. Right. He understood them instinctively, spoke their language, and entertained them. On the other hand, as a barrister, as a lawyer, he knew how to speak eloquently in the courts. And then when he became a member of Parliament, he changed his speech to speak in that context.
He would have made a great deacon, I think. I guess, and he knew how to project his voice. He studied, he'd go to the place where he was going to talk, and he knew if I stand by this pillar, I know that my voice is going to project.
And that skill was so important, especially then, right? Without all the modern ways we have to project sound. And absolutely. So he certainly understood that. He also understood that was the way folks were entertained. There wasn't TV or movies or anything. Yeah, you would go to a courtroom to hear a case for a day's entertainment. Sure. He understood that.
And the necessity of amplification without electronics.
Exactly. Yeah. He was a master at that. So hopefully there's a bit of that as well in the film.
So you started to form, you learned more about him, and you studied him, and now not only does the story have to be told, it has to be told soon. Right?
Hopefully.
At some point, right?
What I was going for, a very specific way, which is a screenplay. Yeah. My thought was always to that it would be a film, that his life and his story would really lend itself to a film, and that's the medium that really attracts people. There are many good books about Daniel O'Connell.
Have you any writings?
No, I've never written anything other than. So I wrote a screenplay. That's a very specific type of writing, and I would call that first version that I did 15 years ago or so my Hollywood version. So no budget constraints, as many extras as we need, and I had that version. Writing is about rewriting, and I did drafts and drafts and drafts, and got it to a place where I was happy. I entered it into some screenplay contests, actually won one contest back in 2009, and placed well in some other contests, and then tried to shop it around to different folks. Didn't meet with very much success in terms of getting the Hollywood types of folks who had be interested in I
have to imagine that's a highly competitive market. I mean, just to try to get Yeah.
competitive and difficult to.
Mm.
It's certainly a needle in a haystack. A bit of the personal side. We lived in Rhode Island, and our children were getting older into their high school years. We were homeschooling them,
Mm-hmm.
and many people do continue to homeschool into the high school years. But we were looking, because you're starting to talk about physics and chemistry and algebra and things like that. So we were looking, and we actually, my wife found the Trivium School in Lancaster.
Sure. Yep.
Wonderful school. And we've actually moved to Shirley so that our children could attend Trivium. This is going back in about 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved, and our family started to go. I had 2 daughters and a son. And Trivium is also very big on arts and performing arts and theater.
Great.
And we got involved in that. And as we got more involved in it, I became friends with Peter Murphy. I don't know if you know Peter, but he was running. He's a very accomplished actor, and he's in the film. He ran Peter Murphy Players.
Oh, wow.
And back in 2017, I took my screenplay and I adapted it to a stage play. We put that stage play on with folks from Trivium and Parishioners of St. John's and Clinton, and we did 2 performances.
I did recognize a couple of people, and I'm it's amazing. I mean, they really did well. So these are persons that have been in other productions through the Trivium School then?
Exactly.
So, okay, all right. So this isn't just knocking on doors.
As you can tell, through this conversation, this has been a very long-term project for me.
Sure.
Right, going all the way back to 85, but now we're up into 2017. And we had such a great time. And we probably had about 40 actors altogether. Mm-hmm. And we did 2 performances.
Now, did you have any... I guess ringers. I mean, you have is it Molly Smiley? Is it
Molly Smiley?
Yeah, and Peg Scanlon Murphy.
Peg is Peter's mother.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
And 2 actresses in the film.
Really quality job too. I mean, were any of these? I mean, are they professionally trained? How did
I don't believe professionally. They've done a lot of kind of amateur acting in different productions, and they were in this play that we did.
Sure.
And then Brendan Enright, who plays King George. He was in our play. Peter Murphy was in our play. A number of other folks were in our play.
Wonderful.
So that was 2017. It was a lot of fun. I think reasonably successful. Still wasn't getting anywhere with the screenplay version. So I've done the Hollywood screenplay. I've done the stage play. What if I did a manageable film version that we could pull off locally? The other big piece was Trivium. Have you ever been to Trivium?
No, I know several of the folks. Jim Kelly is a friend of mine. His father was one of the co-founders.
Yes, that's right. And Jim was also in the film.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
I
tapped
into
just about all my Trivium and St. John's friends that I could tap into. Father Mazzoni is in the film.
Oh, wonderful.
Has a speaking part in the film. Does an excellent job.
Yeah, so I'll look for the guy trying to sell Knights of Columbus insurance. It's okay, all right. Yeah, that's actually that would have been before Father McGivney, so probably not.
Father McGivney, it's interesting you say, absolutely would have known of Daniel O'Connell. He was a bit later,
he would have been,
but as from Ireland and his family from Ireland would have been a very large influence.
Sure.
There is actually a Daniel O'Connell branch of the Knights of Columbus in Chicago.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I wrote a scaled down version of the screenplay. And then, so the Trivium School, I mentioned that because it's a beautiful, probably about 100-year-old building. Beautiful and very ornate period, design, many different rules. Essentially, it's a mansion. Lent itself very well in terms of a set for the film.
Most of the film was...
much of the film is
really?
filmed both inside O'Connell's study, a courtroom, their dining room are all inside. And then there are beautiful grounds outside of Trivium as well.
Oh, yeah.
So the duel is outside in the grounds.
Beautiful.
And then the voting scene that takes place in Ennis is outside. There's also another beautiful building in Lancaster. You might see it on Main Street. It's a big yellow building. It's the Music Conservatory.
Okay.
I was able to use that as well.
Wonderful.
I also built in my barn. I have a barn in Shirley. I built the indoor of the peasant cottage.
Oh, wonderful.
And then in Bolton, there's a kiln that I ran across. By the way, all this is quite providential. That I would find these things. I was guided and led to these things. But there's a kiln that is the exterior of the peasant cottage.
Wow.
That I was able to use as well to film.
Wonderful. So there was no real travel for this? I mean, almost everything you did
Not
locally?
too much.
Yeah.
There were a couple of days. One day, Father Mazzoni was kind enough to put 15 of us into his van and bring us to his friend's oceanside place in Dennis on Cape Cod.
Wonderful.
Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
We needed a place that was supposed to be the Irish seashore for a scene.
Yeah.
And it was tremendous. It worked out really, really
Nothing
well.
with really, really high cliffs, though.
Right. No, not the cliffs of Moher.
All right, okay.
But a nice seashore. And so we did that out in Dennis. And then another day, we went down to Rhode Island in Bristol. Mm-hmm. There's a Columban Fathers retirement home down there.
Okay.
I needed a dock.
Sure.
For one of the scenes. And they have this lovely little dock. And there's a Father John Brannigan, of all people, from Ireland, who was very generously let us use his space and his dock for a day. But beyond that, then we were in Lancaster, Shirley, and Bolton.
Okay. Wow. That's great that you were able to accomplish this so local. Usually with some of these projects, you're jet setting here and there.
I have to tell you, God has the best plans. And I wanted the big Hollywood production to happen. I'm so glad it didn't. We had such a great time. And it also forces you to be creative, right? When you have less, when you have, how can we use the Trivium School or this room or this place and be creative about it, because we don't have a big budget and carpenters to come in and change it and fix it and do everything.
Yeah.
And I found that process to be so, stimulating and enjoyable to go through and really think it through. And when you get that solution, it's just very, very satisfying.
Now, you mentioned that for Daniel O'Connell, the people of Ireland, he didn't necessarily compartmentalize whether it was Protestant or Catholic or this or that or whatever. He said, as an attorney, he took on the Irish people as his client, right? Is that the way he...
Correct.
Okay, but yet he was facing an opponent that was strictly Protestant. I mean, the Protestant Parliament, and with extreme prejudice. Absolutely. Against the Catholic...
Bigotry.
Absolute bigotry. And there was this Act of Union that was passed.
1800.
I guess, where does your film pick up in this timeline?
So that's a great question. My film is very ambitious in that it takes him almost from cradle to grave.
Really? Oh,
yes.
Fantastic. Okay.
But in terms of your question, there were two big components of what he was trying to do. One was Catholic emancipation, right? So Catholics couldn't sit in Parliament; they couldn't hold certain offices,
right?
And so he agitated for that for years and years. And finally, a seat in Clare opens up for Parliament. Mm-hmm. And he's at this point, I don't want to give too much away, but he said, I'm going to run. I can't hold the office, but I'm going to run it.
That's agitating.
The voting was all public at that point. So it was a big risk for the tenant farmers to go against their landlord.
Sure. So
that all plays out in the film. But that was his first big goal, and he did become the first Catholic to be seated in Parliament in 300 years.
Now, how did that work? Because there was the King of England, his standing order was that, anybody who spoke of Catholic liberty or worked for it, you're the enemy. How did that pass muster?
First of all, he was very, and it's described in the film as slippery. Because
he was in the seat before the king even knew it.
To a certain degree, that was part of it. But he
was an attorney.
There's another. I'm thinking of he was an attorney.
He knew the law.
And I'm smiling because Brendan Enright plays King George.
Oh, okay.
And does a wonderful job. So you need to see that to understand. You'll get a more complete answer to that. You can see, but he just basically he backed him into a corner.
I don't think there's anybody in history who has done that, honestly.
This has actually been described, if you read, as the first peaceful rebellion in history, in human history. And he always knew he had the truth on his side.
The Liberator, the story of Daniel O'Connell, has its world premiere August 24th at Regal Cinemas at Solomon Pond Mall, and then August 29th in Maynard Fine Arts Theater. And also a DVD will come out in September, right?
That's the plan.
Excellent. Great. So we'll post all the links that are appropriate for that on our website. Is there anything you want folks to know about being able to get out and see the movie?
There is a website. It's the liberatormovie.com.
The liberatormovie.com. Got it.
Is a website. I'm here talking about it, but it wouldn't have been possible without the community of St. John's and Clinton and Trivium School. We had hundreds of cast and crew extras come together, and people who baked for us and did artwork for us and composed music for us. The score is beautiful. And all these people devoted their time and their talent. It's a great story, an important story about this great Catholic leader a couple of hundred years ago. And I would also say about the people that he led. To me, what's also very inspiring is not only did he lead with compassion to others and patience for others and love for others, but his people were also, despite the harshness of their lives and the difficulties in their lives, had profound faith that gave them peace and contentment.
Well, this is great. It's been a delight talking with you. Bill McCann, thank you so much. Director, creator of The Liberator. I am encouraging everybody to see it. As Daniel O'Connell says, at least in the movie, for those who are concerned about our own country, it's no use liberating your own country and losing your soul. So, get to Mass regularly, Sundays and holy days of obligation. This is Deacon Chuck Kelly for WQPH 89.3 FM, Catholic Radio, serving Shirley, Fitchburg, and the world. God bless you.
On the WQPH 89.3 FM community calendar, if you're a man looking for inspiration in these dark times, have I got a treat for you. WQPH is hosting a Catholic men's retreat on Saturday, August 27th at St. Benedict's Abbey, 252 Still River Road, Still River, Massachusetts. The primary speakers are Dan Duddy and Tom Caffey, hosts of WQPH's The 13th Apostle, every Saturday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. They've been doing men's events all across the East Coast, and this will be their first event for WQPH in Massachusetts. The theme? Where are the hidden heroes of today? The retreat runs from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. and includes the following on the schedule: the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass at 9 a.m., morning coffee and a light breakfast, group prayers, free time during which confession will be available, luncheon, a talk from Dan Duddy and Tom Caffey on our theme, Where are the hidden heroes of today?, a group discussion with Q&A, and closing prayers. There will also be unblessed books and sacramentals available at the event. The cost is $55, but only $45 for early bird registration, which can be done by August 23rd. That price includes both the luncheon and the light breakfast. You can sign up in 3 ways. Go to WQPHradio.org. That's WQPHradio.org. Hit the donate button. In the notes for the donation, specify that it's for the retreat. If you want to sponsor additional people, feel free to do so. Just include their names as well. Or you can call us at 617-459-8735. That's 617-459-8735. We'll take your information and your payment over the phone. Or you can email us at WQPH893@Comcast.net. It's WQPH893@Comcast.net. With your request, we'll contact you back and confirm the number of tickets and payment. Again, that's Saturday, August 27th, St. Benedict's Abbey, Still River Road, Still River, Massachusetts. This has been the WQPH 89.3 FM Community Calendar.